Welcome to Dice and Quills, where the art of storytelling meets the roll of the dice. I am Darren Ruckle, professional game master and TTRPG writer, here to share the craft behind world building, adventure design, and running unforgettable games. Whether you're a fellow creator, an aspiring pro, or a lifelong player, you're in the right place. So sharpen your quills, ready your dice, and let's dive into the worlds we imagine. Today we're talking about one of the most important narrative tools you'll ever use, consequence. Because without consequence, your story is just motion. It might look exciting, it might be clever, but it doesn't land. Players want to feel like what they do matters, that their choices shape the world, that their failures hurt, that their victories echo. But delivering that kind of narrative weight takes more than just saying, the world reacts. It takes structure, timing, and most importantly, it takes trust. This episode is about how to build that trust, how to use consequence to deepen engagement, not punish missteps, how to make decisions ripple without overwhelming your prep, and how to keep players coming back not just to see what happens, but to face what they've already set in motion. We'll break down the anatomy of consequence, the kinds of choices players remember, the right way to deliver impact, and what to do when someone makes a choice that breaks your campaign wide open. Let's start by defining what consequence really means in a tabletop game, and why it's not just about punishment, but about participation. Let's get one thing straight. Consequence is not the same thing as punishment. A punished player feels shut down. A player experiencing consequence feels seen. When we talk about consequence at the table, we're talking about narrative cause and effect. A decision leads to change. A risk leads to fallout. A moment lands, and the world shifts in response. This isn't about creating gotchas. It's about building trust. The kind of trust that says, your actions have weight here. You're not just along for the ride. You're building the ride as you go. That's what separates a reactive world from a responsive one. In a reactive world, the GM waits for a player to mess up and slaps them with a result. That's not consequence. That's control. In a responsive world, the GM observes the player's choices and builds forward. The consequences make sense. They reflect values, themes, logic. They feel earned. And when done well, they don't shut the story down. They open it up. You burn a bridge, and now you have to find another route. You spare the villain, and they return changed. You fail to save someone, and their absence creates tension in the group. These aren't punishments. They're the shape of the story adapting to the characters inside it. The players feel it. They remember it. And they start to lean in harder, because they know this isn't just your story. It's theirs. Next, we'll look at the different types of player choice, and which ones lend themselves to strong, memorable consequence. Not every choice needs consequence. But the right kinds of choices, those are the ones that define your campaign. Let's break them down. First, you have narrative choices, decisions that shape character arcs, alliances, and long-term direction. Do they spare the villain? Accept the crown? Walk away from someone who needs them? These are the choices that echo. They might not affect the next encounter, but they change how the world sees the party. And more importantly, how the party sees itself. Second, there are tactical choices. Where to fight, who to trust, what resources to spend. These lend themselves to short-term consequence, things like terrain disadvantages, strategic fallout, or opportunity loss. When you follow through, players start thinking not just about what they can do, but what doing it will cost. Then come the moral choices. These don't always have a right answer, and that's the point. Do they protect the innocent or fulfill the mission? Do they expose the corrupt system or survive within it? The power of moral consequence lies in ambiguity. The players make a choice, and then they have to live with it. There are also social choices. How players treat NPCs, who they elevate, who they insult. These often feel small in the moment, but they're some of the richest sources of consequence. The stable boy you helped becomes a loyal scout. the noble you mocked, now leads the faction opposing you. These payoffs don't need to be big, they just need to be. And finally, ignored choices. That's right. Not choosing is still a choice. When the party walks past a beggar, delays a decision, or avoids a call to action, you don't need to force them back on track. You just let the world move forward without them. Someone else answers the call. The town falls. The villain escapes. That's consequence too. Next, we'll talk about how to deliver consequence. Not just in what happens, but in how it happens. Because even the best designed payoff will fall flat if the delivery doesn't land. So you've got a meaningful player choice. You know what it's going to affect. Now comes the crucial part. Delivering that consequence in a way that lands. Because this is where a lot of GMS fumble. Not in logic, in presentation. Here's the first rule. Make the consequence visible. If the players do something risky, selfish, or bold, and the fallout happens 3 sessions later in a completely different context, they won't connect the dots. They'll think it's random. Or worse, that it came from nowhere. You want the players to feel the thread. That doesn't mean spelling it out in a monologue. It means putting a symbol, a callback, or a familiar face in the scene that ties it together. The bridge they didn't repair. Now it's collapsed when they need it most. And the NPC they ignored is standing there, shaking their head. That's all it takes. A callback, a shift in tone, a changed relationship. And the players remember, right, we caused this. Second, deliver with emotional clarity. Not just what happened, but why it matters. Who was hurt? Who gained power? Who changed their opinion of the party? These emotional shifts are the heart of consequence. They make the world feel alive, not because it reacts with force, but because it reacts with memory. Third, you need timing. Not every consequence has to be immediate, but the first one should be. Early in the campaign, let a small decision create visible change. Help the players learn that the world is watching. Once that's established, you can delay payoffs later, because they'll trust that when the consequence arrives, it will make sense. And finally, don't always escalate. Consequences aren't just bad things. Sometimes a bold move earns loyalty. Sometimes a quiet kindness changes an enemy's heart. You're not just tracking mistakes. You're reinforcing values. Let the players see that good actions ripple too. Next, we'll explore how to balance consequence with player agency. How to hold players accountable without forcing them down a single path. One of the biggest challenges in delivering consequence is avoiding the illusion of control. You want the world to respond to the players, not replace their choices with yours. This is where a lot of GMS oversteer. A player makes a dramatic decision, and suddenly the GM builds the next 3 sessions around that fallout. Sounds good, right? But if that consequence forces the players onto a single track, it stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like a punishment disguised as story. So how do you balance consequence with agency? First, offer forks, not funnels. When a consequence lands, it should change the context, not eliminate choice. If they sided with a warlord, now the peacekeepers won't work with them. That's a new challenge, a shift in terrain. But it's not the only path forward. They can negotiate, intimidate, find another route. Second, preserve tension, not direction. Let the players change goals. Let them shift tactics. The consequence doesn't need to dictate what they do next. It just needs to matter. It's a wrinkle, not a wall. Third, check your intention. Before introducing a consequence, ask, am I guiding the story or reacting to it? If the answer is, I want them to realize they made a mistake, pause. That's a red flag. Your job isn't to teach a lesson, it's to tell a story with them. Fourth, stay flexible. Sometimes the players will outthink the consequence. They'll neutralize a threat you thought would haunt them. They'll charm an enemy you expected to fight. That's not a failure. That's the payoff of trust. Let it happen. Let the consequence become a turning point, not a trap. And finally, communicate tone through the world, not through correction. If the players go dark in a hopeful campaign, let the world push back emotionally. If they play noble in a cynical one, show them the cost. You're shaping mood through response, not judgment. Consequence doesn't mean cornering the players. It means meeting them, wherever they go, with a world that takes them seriously. Next, we'll look at how to build long-tail consequence, the kind that pays off over multiple arcs or sessions and makes your world feel truly alive. Some of the most powerful consequences aren't immediate. They're the ones that wait, linger, grow in the background until the players have forgotten, and then return not as a twist, but as a reminder. This is long-tail consequence, and it's where campaigns get depth. When a choice the players made in Session 4 shapes a conflict in Session 14, the table lights up. Not because they were punished, but because they were remembered. The world remembered them, and that's when the world starts to feel real. To do this well, you need to build memory into your prep. Keep a running list, not just of events, but of decisions, who they allied with, who they betrayed, what promises they made and didn't keep, what laws they broke, what causes they supported. These don't need to be story arcs right away. They just need to stay in the world. The thief they spared becomes a minor gang leader. The merchant they snubbed joins a rival faction. The village they saved spreads their legend. And now everyone's watching to see if they live up to it. That's the beauty of long-tail consequence. It turns small moments into reputation. You don't need to plan every payoff in advance. In fact, it's better if you don't. Just plant threads and watch which ones the players pull. Let their behavior shape what comes back. And when it comes back, tie it to emotion. The NPC who was loyal now feels betrayed. The city that hailed them as heroes now fears their power. You're not just bringing back plot. You're bringing back relationships. This also gives you flexibility. If a plot thread stalls, revisit a long-tail consequence instead. You'll instantly add tension and weight without needing a new villain or map. And the best part, you can reward growth. If a player used to be reckless but now plays carefully, let an old consequence test that change. Not to punish, to reflect. This was who you were. Who are you now? Next, we'll explore how to improvise consequence when players surprise you, and how to make last-minute decisions feel like long-term payoffs. Sometimes the best consequences are the ones you didn't plan. The players make a wild choice. Ally with the villain, burn the bridge, chase the red herring, and suddenly you're improvising the fallout in real time. No notes, no roadmap, just instinct. This is where a lot of GMS hesitate. They worry the consequence won't feel earned, or they try to delay it until they've had time to prep. But here's the truth. Spontaneous consequence can be just as powerful as the long-tail kind, if you ground it in the logic of your world. Ask yourself 3 questions. First, who saw this? Consequence needs a witness. Even if no one was in the room, word travels. Gossip spreads. Magic watches. If no one sees it, invent someone who might. The fallout needs a path. Second, who gains or loses from this? Think politically, socially, economically. Who benefits from what just happened? Who's threatened? Find the new tension and lean into it. Third, what changes now? This is your cue to pivot the next scene, not your whole arc. A new obstacle, a shift in status, an altered relationship. You don't need to rebuild the campaign. You just need to let the players see that their choice mattered. Even a minor improvised beat, like a town guard remembering their name for the wrong reasons, can snowball into something bigger. You don't need volume, you need weight. And if you're unsure whether the consequence lands, say less. Let the players react. They'll fill in the blanks. They'll ask, wait, is this because we? And that's your cue. Yes, it is. Now let's see what you do about it. Improvised consequence works best when it feels like the world is thinking for itself. You're not pushing back. You're pushing forward with attention. Next, we'll talk about the role of NPCs in carrying consequence and how to use them to to make emotional fallout feel personal, not procedural. Consequence hits harder when it's delivered through a face. Mechanics are fine. Reputation scores, faction meters, price adjustments, they work. But nothing lands like an NPC looking the party in the eye and saying, "You let this happen." Because now it's not just a shift in the world, it's a shift in a relationship. It's emotional. And that sticks. This is where NPCs become your most powerful tool. Not just as plot messengers, but as consequence holders. The people who felt the ripple, lived with the fallout, and now return with something to say. Think about it in terms of emotional mirrors. The soldier they inspired now fights for their ideals, even when it gets people hurt. The noble they manipulated now sees them as dangerous. The ally they left behind refuses to speak to them. These are small moments, but they create moral texture. And they don't have to be angry. One of the most powerful forms of consequence is quiet disappointment. An NPC who looks at them differently, treats them with formality instead of warmth, leaves a note instead of saying goodbye in person. You don't need speeches, just a shift in tone. This kind of delivery also makes consequence feel targeted, not as a punishment, but as a conversation. The world is reacting to them, not just to actions in a vacuum. It also creates opportunities. Maybe that NPC can be convinced. Maybe the players can make amends. Maybe the consequence isn't just fallout. It's a chance to choose differently this time. When in doubt, return to the faces they've already met. The ones they thought were done. Because consequence isn't just what the world does behind the curtain, it's what the world says to their face. Next, we'll explore how to use consequence to reinforce theme, and how to tie decisions back to the core of the story you're telling. Consequence isn't just a pacing tool or a tension device, it's also one of the sharpest instruments you have for reinforcing theme. Every story has a central tension, a question it keeps asking. Should power be used or restrained? Can you hold on to your ideals in a broken system? What does loyalty cost? When you shape consequence to echo those questions, you create cohesion. You don't need to hit players over the head with it. But when their decisions lead to fallout that reflects the emotional center of your campaign, everything starts to feel more connected. If your game is about moral compromise, let the consequence of mercy be betrayal. Let the consequence of ruthlessness be loneliness. You're not punishing, you're mirroring. This is especially useful when players test the theme. They'll try to step outside it, break its rules, or deny that it matters. That's where consequence speaks loudest. The story doesn't scold, it reflects. The world answers their choice with a situation that sharpens the original tension. And the more consistent this is, the stronger the arc feels. This also gives you creative freedom. You don't have to invent new plot every time the party zigs. You just ask, what does this choice mean inside our theme? And you deliver the next beat accordingly. Even flavor-level decisions, like whether to accept a noble title or refuse it, can carry weight when the world reacts in a way that ties back to your story's core question. Players may not always name the theme, but they'll feel it. They'll sense that the world is asking the same kinds of questions over and over. And every time they answer, with a sword, a speech, or silence, you get to show what that answer costs. That's how campaigns grow depth, not through lore, but through emotional echo. Next, we'll talk about pacing, when to let consequences hit right away, and when to delay them for greater effect. Timing is everything. Deliver a consequence too soon, and it might feel cheap, like a trap waiting to spring. Wait too long, and the players won't connect the dots. They'll forget the cause. The impact loses clarity. So how do you pace consequence for maximum effect? The rule of thumb is this: early for trust, delayed for depth. Early in a campaign or with new players, let choices generate immediate consequences. A guard insulted leads to a denied entry. A resource spent recklessly creates a shortage in the next scene. These aren't dramatic moments. They're teaching beats. They show the table that you're paying attention. Once that foundation is laid, You earn the ability to delay. A village spared returns the favor 10 sessions later. A spy planted early surfaces in a moment of crisis. These long-form consequences carry weight precisely because they took time to arrive. You're not just pacing plot, you're building anticipation. There's also the rhythm of session timing to consider. If a player makes a major decision at the end of a session, you don't always want to hit them with the fallout next time they sit down. That moment's energy has shifted. You might want to let the next scene breathe, then hit them with the ripple once they're re-immersed. Sometimes it's best to delay consequence until the players think they got away with it. Let them feel the silence, the calm. Then let the fallout creep in from a different angle. A new character, a policy change, a rumor. Suddenly they realize the world was watching, and it just took time to answer. Conversely, there are moments that demand immediate reaction. When the players cross a known line, betray an ally, break a vow, expose a secret, don't let that sit. The speed of the consequence reflects the seriousness of the action. When in doubt, ask, is this consequence meant to teach, escalate, or haunt? That tells you when to play it. Next, we'll look at how to avoid consequence fatigue, the point where players feel overwhelmed, paralyzed, or like they're being punished no matter what they choose. Too much of a good thing can kill momentum, and consequence is no exception. When every decision leads to setback, when every action causes a ripple of failure or loss, your players start to shrink. They second guess, they hesitate, and eventually they disengage. Not because they don't care, but because they feel like nothing they do will work out. This is consequence fatigue. It usually comes from good intentions. You want the world to feel real. You want the stakes to matter. But consequence without hope starts to feel like punishment. And once that sets in, your players stop making bold choices. They start playing safe, or worse, passive. So how do you avoid it? Start by balancing tone. Every consequence doesn't need to be negative. Show positive ripple too. Let kindness buy loyalty. Let restraint earn respect. Let courage inspire others. A world that only punishes is a world no one wants to save. Next, mix the weight. Not every choice needs world-altering fallout. Some can create texture, a recurring joke, a shift in tone, a new flavor. These small consequences remind players that not every beat is a crisis. Also, let them repair. If a choice led to a fracture, make that fracture feel narratively reversible. Let them rebuild trust, restore alliances, undo harm. The chance to make things right gives consequence meaning, not just weight. Watch for emotional saturation. If the last 3 sessions have all ended in failure, loss, or betrayal, pull back. Give them a win, a respite, a moment of clarity. Because contrast is what gives consequence its punch. Without light, shadow becomes flat. And finally, invite intention. Let the players set goals and then watch the world respond to those goals, not just their mistakes. If they're shaping policy, leading factions, saving lives, let the consequence of those ambitions show up as attention, not just friction. Because in the end, consequence should fuel the story, not burden it. Next, we'll talk about what to do when a player makes a campaign-breaking choice. The kind that derails your prep, splits the party, or forces you to rethink the arc. Every GM has had the moment. A player makes a choice so big, so unexpected, so world-shaking, that your prep evaporates on contact. The villain is killed early. The artifact is destroyed. The party splits over a moral line. Suddenly, the campaign you thought you were running isn't there anymore. This is what we call a campaign-breaking choice, and it's one of the purest expressions of consequence. Handled well, it becomes legendary. Mishandled, it fractures the table. So what do? First, pause. Not dramatically, just quietly. Let the moment breathe. Don't rush into improvising the next arc. Don't punish the decision with an instant backlash. Let the players see you thinking. That's not a sign of panic. It's a sign of respect. Second, ask yourself what the choice meant. Why did they do it? What were they trying to say, solve, avoid, or change? The more you understand their intention, the more meaningfully you can respond. Maybe they broke your plot, but they revealed what they care about in the game. That's gold. Third, don't erase it. It's tempting to soften the impact or undo the action. Resist that. Lean into it. Players will remember that you let the world bend, that you listened. Now your job is to find the new center of gravity. Fourth, rebuild from the tension. The story may have shifted, but its themes probably haven't. Can you bring in a new antagonist from the same faction? Can you escalate the fallout from the destroyed artifact? Can you make the party split the engine of the next arc instead of the end of the last one? You're not scrambling, you're evolving. And fifth, check in. After the session, talk to the group. That was a big moment. I'm reworking some things to honor it. Anything you're excited or nervous about going forward? It's not a vote. It's a chance to reaffirm that you're still in this together. The best consequences are the ones that change the game, not end it. Next, we'll explore how to track and manage consequence over time, how to stay organized without scripting, and how to keep your world's memory sharp without overwhelming yourself. If you want your world to remember, you have to remember first. That doesn't mean scripting every outcome or planning 10 sessions ahead. It means tracking choices in a way that keeps you nimble. A system for consequence memory that works with your style, not against it. So let's talk tools. The simplest is the consequence log, a running list of choices that could ripple. Not all of them will, but if you don't write them down, you'll lose the moment. Just the basics. What happened? Who saw it? Who was affected? Don't write a novel. Write a hook. Then use tags. If a player insulted a noble, tag it reputation, political. If they saved a village, tag it favor, rural. Later, when you're prepping a session in that zone of influence, a quick glance shows you what might come back. You can also build a relationship tracker. Nothing fancy, just NPCs, their current opinion of the party, and one line on why. Shift the opinion as actions land. This lets you improvise reactions that feel consistent and earned. For campaign-scale games, consider a ripple tracker. Pick a few major areas: political, magical, spiritual, economic. Then when something big happens, ask, what changes in each category, even if only a little? You're not simulating a world. You're sketching motion. And don't be afraid to retire threads. Not every choice needs a sequel. If a decision was contained and its payoff landed, let it rest. The log is not a list of obligations. It's a pool of possibility. What you're really doing is keeping a living memory of the story you're building. Enough to stay coherent. Enough to call back. Enough to make your players go, wait, this ties back to session 5, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Next, we'll close out the episode with a recap of what consequence is really doing in your game, and why it's not just about shaping the world, but about shaping how players play. Let's bring it home. Consequence isn't about control. It's not about punishing mistakes or enforcing realism. It's about giving weight to player choice. It's how the story listens, how the world speaks back, how meaning gets built one decision at a time. When you deliver consequence well, your players stop asking, what's the right move? And start asking, what kind of person do I want to be in this world? And that's when your game changes. Because now they're not just playing, they're shaping. They see their values reflected, their past remembered, their legacy unfolding. You're not just telling a story with them, you're helping them build identity through play. So design your consequences with care. Vary the weight. Reflect your themes. Use NPCs to ground emotion. Track what matters. And always show the players that their actions ripple. Whether it's a war ignited, a trust lost, or a stranger offering help because of something they did 6 sessions ago, the message is the same. You were here, and the world noticed. Next time on Dice and Quills, we're talking about Session 0, how to build alignment, establish tone, prevent common problems, and set your campaign up for the kind of trust that makes all this possible in the first place. If this episode helped you think differently about consequence, consider sharing it, rating the show, or reaching out. I'd love to hear the wildest payoff your table ever saw, especially the ones you didn't see coming. Until then, sharpen your quills, ready your dice. And remember, the best stories aren't written in plot. They're written in choices.